Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada. All glories to our revered speaker for today, His Grace Anand Vilas Prabhu. And all glories to assembled Vaishnavi devotees. Devotees, we thank you for being here. Today is the first day of the week, Monday, and it also happens to be the first day of a new month, September. And it is our honor to have His Grace Anand Vilas Prabhu speaking with us today. Today, I believe, is the first day that Anand Vilas Prabhu is speaking on this platform. And we will share a little bit about his humble self, probably after the class, by which time we would have had many devotees here. So, but briefly, Anand Vilas Prabhu is a Gita Nagari congregation member. And we'll talk a little bit more about him. Prabhuji, so you're welcome to Hare Krishna, Africa.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada just finished chanting the Jai Radha Madhava. Some devotees also like to chant the Jai Radha Madhava themselves. But most people generally just go by what Srila Prabhupada did. And then we'll put the verse on the screen. You recite the slokas. Devotees may not respond. If you want devotees to respond to that, is also permissible. We can also do that. And then it's just like a temple room setting. So you go over the slokas and then the translation, the purport, and then you share your insights. And after that, devotees may have some questions, and then you try to help them with their questions. The speaker usually speaks for about an hour, and then if there is time, devotees ask questions. So, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. So
thank you, Sade Prabhu, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with the wonderful devotees of Hare Krishna Africa.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So let's do this.
Okay. So let us chant the verse. I'll first chant it word by word, and then we can chant the verse. And if devotees are inspired, they can chant with me or after me.
Okay.
This is from the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 12th chapter. This is entitled The Appearance of the Kumaras and Others. And this is the 19th verse of this chapter. Tapasaiva param jyotir bhagavantam adhokshajam sarvabhuta guhavasam anjasa vindate puman tapasaiva param jyotir bhagavantam adhokshajam sarvabhuta guhavasam anjasa vindate puman tapasaiva param jyotir bhagavantam adhokshajam sarvabhuta guhavasam vindat anjasa vindate puman. Anybody would like to chant the verse?
Tapasaiva param jyotir.
Tapasaiva param jyotir.
Bhagavantam adhokshajam.
Bhagavantam adhokshajam.
Sarvabhuta guhavasam.
Sarvabhuta guhavasam.
Anjasa vindate puman.
Anjasa vindate puman. And word for word translation. tapasa, by penance, eva, only, param, the supreme, jyoti, light, bhagavantam, unto the personality of Godhead, adhokshajam, he who is beyond the approach of the senses, sarva bhuta guha vasam, residing in the heart of all living entities, anjasa, completely, vindate, can know, puman, a person. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. By penance only can one even approach the personality of Godhead, who is within the heart of every living entity, and at the same time, beyond the reach of all senses. I'll read the translation again. By penance only can one even approach the personality of Godhead, who is within the heart of every living entity, and at the same time, beyond the reach of all senses. Purport. Rudra was advised by Brahma to perform penance as an example to his sons and followers that penance is necessary for attaining the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the common mass of people follow the path shown by an authority. Thus, Brahma, disgusted with the Rudra generations and afraid of being devoured by the increase of population, asked Rudra to stop producing such an unwanted generation and to take to penance for attaining the favor of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, we find in pictures that Rudra is always sitting in meditation for attainment of the favor of the Lord. Indirectly, the sons of and followers of Rudra are advised to stop the business of annihilation, following the principle, Rudra principle, while the peaceful creation of Brahma is going on. Let me read the last sentence again. Indirectly, the sons and followers of Rudra are advised to stop the business of annihilation, following the Rudra principle while the peaceful creation of Brahma is going on. Umagyanatimirandhasya Jnananjanatilakaya Chakshuronmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurume Namaha. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschyate Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. My humble obeisances to all the devotees of Hare Krishna Africa, and thank you, Sadeh Prabhu, for inviting me to speak in this forum. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity. It's always wonderful to have the opportunity to share from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because as Sukadeva Goswami says, that three categories of personalities are benefited when Bhagavad Gita is spoken: the speaker, the hearer, and the people who ask questions. And the wonderful thing is that they all are equally benefited. It is not like the speaker is benefited more and the hearers are benefited less. So all categories of persons, the speaker, the hearers, and the people who ask questions are equally benefited. And so it's wonderful to have the opportunity to be able to read from this Amala Purana, the spotless Purana, and also read the nectarian words of Srila Prabhupada's purports, which have the capacity to purify our hearts completely. So this very beautiful canto, third canto, I'll just give you a little bit of context. Some of you may have attended all the classes and might know the context, and some of you might not have, but this is a very beautiful canto. And so the third canto really is primarily Sarga and Visarga, so the primary creation of the Lord and the secondary creation by Brahma. And so it's a very beautiful pastimes in the third canto. And the pinnacle of this pastimes is really the last 6 chapters of this canto, which is the teachings of Kapila to his mother Devahuti. So you will come there in due course of time. It's a very beautiful canto. And so think about the setting where Sukadeva Goswami is now present in front of Parikshit Maharaj, who asks him these questions that what is the duty of persons at all times, and especially for persons who are about to die? And in response to this question, Sukadev Goswami starts speaking the various different pastimes of the creation of the Lord. And the very detailed questions about how did the Lord create the three primary incarnations of the Lord, the Purusha avatars, and all that is described in great detail, the creation of the elements. So one may wonder that Parikshit Maharaj is only 7 days to live. So why is Sukadev Goswami going into so much detail about the creation of matter and all these different details, where he should have simply told him that simply chant the holy name? Just take Mridang Kartal and just 7 days, you can do 7 days, Akhanda Harinam, continuous holy name chanting. So, and Prabhupada always tells us, if you read the purports very closely, right from the first canto, the Srimad Bhagavatam should be studied systematically from the first verse of the first canto, first chapter, to the last verse of the 12th canto, systematically. So the question might come, why then did Sukadev Goswami even bother with so much technical detail about creation and subcreation and Brahma's creation and so on, when ultimately the goal is to chant the holy name? So the purpose that Prabhupada answers this question also is that everything is Krishna Katha, including the activities of the external energy of the Lord and the activities of the internal energy of the Lord. So the personal pastimes of the Lord that are in the 10th canto are activities of the internal energy of the Lord, whereas the activities of creation and subcreation are the activities of the external energy of the Lord. And they are all equally Krishna Katha. And since we are in the material world, and at least I can speak for myself, still very much in material consciousness, it is important for us to understand how the material consciousness of the living entity can be purified by hearing about the material aspects of the creation of the Lord. And that's what Srila Prabhupada says in his purports, that we systematically hear about how the Lord creates, so that then by the time we get to the 10th canto, we are sufficiently purified that we can hear about the internal activities of the Lord. So that's how these cantos progress. And very beautifully at the beginning of the third canto, you would have read how Vidura, he was chastised by Duryodhana because he told Dhritarashtra that he should just give the kingdom back to the Pandavas. This was before the battle of Kurukshetra, and at that point he was banished from the kingdom, and Vidura just left. He just left his bows and arrows at the entrance of the palace, and he left, and he went on pilgrimage. And so he went on pilgrimage, and this whole story begins at the end of the second canto, where Suta Goswami asks, Shonaka Rishis asked Suta Goswami, can you tell us about the discussion between Maitreya and Vidura? That's when Sukadev Goswami will begin this pastime of discussing Vidura's what he heard from Maitreya. So this begins with Vidura leaving the palace, and then the first personality he meets is Uddhava. And Uddhava is a great associate of Lord Krishna. And in fact, Uddhava, I was speaking about this just a couple of days ago, that Uddhava was actually so dear to Krishna that he actually looked like Krishna. He used to wear Krishna's clothes. So Krishna used to wear new clothes, and then the next day Uddhava would take those clothes and he wear them. So he kind of looked like Krishna as well. And so he had all these characteristics that were deeply attached to Krishna. Right from his childhood, he would play with dolls. And the Bhagavatam, the first chapter of the third canto, describes that when his mother would call him for breakfast, he would not even want to come because he was playing with the dolls of Krishna. And is so absorbed in his play that he wouldn't want to come. So when Vidura meets Uddhava, he asks him, can you tell me about the Yadus and Krishna? And for a full 40 minutes, Uddhava is just stunned. He doesn't even respond. One muhurta. So can you imagine you ask somebody a question and the person just stares at you for 40 minutes without answering, and you wonder what's happening. But then Vidura was a Mahatma too. So he knew that Uddhava was in trance. He was completely absorbed in Krishna. So he waited for him to come out of that trance, and then Uddhava starts speaking. He speaks very beautiful pastimes of Krishna. and he remembers the entire Krishna Lila. So if you look at the second and the third chapter of the third canto, you get the full summary of the 10th canto, where Uddhava speaks the entire pastime of right from Krishna's birth all the way through his killing of the demons and so on. So very, very summary form, but he remembers all those pastimes. So Vidura asks him, "What did Krishna tell you? What instructions did he leave for you?" And Uddhava is very aware that he's much younger than Vidura, because Vidura is about the age of Krishna's uncle, and Uddhava and Krishna are about the same age, at least from a material standpoint. Of course, Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Um, so Uddhava does not think it's appropriate for him to instruct Vidura. So he says, "When I was hearing from Lord Sri Krishna, Maitreya was also present there. And Maitreya is about the same age as Vidura's father. Vidura's father, seminal father, is Vyasadeva, if you know the story in the Mahabharata. So, and Maitreya Muni and Vyasadeva were students at the ashram of Vyasadev's father, Parashar Muni. So Parashar Muni, so Maitreya and Vyasa were friends. They were also friends. The Srimad Bhagavatam describes when Vidura even talks to Maitreya, he says, "Your friend Vyasadeva wrote the Mahabharata." So Vyasadeva and Maitreya are friends. So Uddhava considers it appropriate that whatever instructions be given to Vidura, who's a great soul, should come from a person who's advanced in age and senior to Vidura. The phrase that Srimad Bhagavatam uses is called, it says the verse is the phrase is Maryada Vyatikrama, which means that transgressing the appropriate behavior. So Uddhava didn't want to transgress the appropriate behavior, that he's trying to give instructions to a person who he considers more elevated. Obviously, Uddhava was Krishna's friend, so by all stretch of imagination, Uddhava was very elevated. But in his humility, he didn't want to transgress what he thought was proper behavior. He said, "No, you're much older than me, so it is not my place to instruct you. Please go and hear from Maitreya." That's how Vidura goes to hear from Maitreya. And he asks all sorts of questions again. He asks questions around how is the material world created and so on. So all that is described in the previous chapters. And so we hear about how Brahma was born from the lotus navel, and the lotus sprouts, and Brahma was born there. When he was born, he doesn't know what's going on. He cannot see anything. It's all darkness, so he doesn't know what's happening. He goes up and down the lotus stem. He doesn't see anything. And in the second canto, we hear about how he hears these two syllables, ta and pa, which is very relevant to the verse we are speaking about today. So he hears tapa, tapa, which means penance. So he hears penance. So he performs penance for 100 celestial years. Now let's not go into the math. But it's a very long time. It's definitely very, very long time, much longer than our 100 years. So he performs penance for a very long time, and he realizes what his position is, what is the position of the Lord, and what he should do. And then he offers very wonderful prayers to the Lord to help him with creation, and he starts creating. That's where we get to this story where he's created the four Kumaras, and at the beginning of this chapter, he creates the four Kumaras, the four transcendental personalities, the great sages who appear in the body of small boys, and they don't wear any clothes, and they're just about 4 years old. So they appear in those bodies, but they're actually very great elevated sages, the oldest personalities in creation, but they're in the bodies of little children, because they feel that when you're a little child, right, you don't have any lusty propensities, and you can stay pure. And I was speaking about this example to another group, that, and again, just an example to understand how the mind works, that if there is a very attractive young lady with a lollipop in her hand, right, and a little child sees that, a young boy sees that attractive young lady with a lollipop, what is that little boy seeing? He sees a lollipop. right? But when a young man sees that same lady with a lollipop in her hand, he doesn't see the lollipop. He only sees the attractive young lady. So the image is the same, but because of the consciousness that has evolved, right? A young boy who's maybe 3 years old is only attracted to the lollipop or an ice cream or whatever the young woman may have in her hand. Whereas a young man in his 20s, maybe, he's only attracted to the woman. He's not attracted to the lollipop. He doesn't care about the lollipop. He might say, okay, you can throw the lollipop and you can come to me. And the young boy, little child might say, you can give me the lollipop and you can go away. Right? So it is just the consciousness. So these four Kumaras, they said, well, we don't want to evolve our consciousness to a point where it gets polluted. So we want to stay as young boys. So when Brahma told them that, no, please, so Brahma created all these progeny so that he could increase the population of the world. So when he told these Kumaras that go and multiply, Kumara said, no, sorry, we're not interested in being married. We're happy doing what we're doing. We want to be brahmacharis. Now, think about the objective. Of course, that's a very lofty goal, but the objective that Brahma had was to increase his population. So when he saw that his sons, who he had created expressly for the purpose of increasing population, decided not to get married and not to have children, he became angry. And even Brahma can become angry because he is in the mode of passion. And because of his anger, through his eyebrows, this personality Rudra was created. And you must have read that in the last few verses. So Rudra was created out of the anger of Lord Brahma. And so the different names, 11 names of Rudra were given, and he was given 11 consorts and places to stay. And then Brahma said, go and multiply, go and create progeny. Now Rudra, Lord Shiva, is in the mode of ignorance. Of course, he's not in the mode of ignorance, but he's the Lord of the mode of ignorance. And the personalities that he creates are also kind of like that. They are the bhutas and pisachas and all these personalities which are the hobgoblins and others. And you'll read more about it in the fourth canto, in the beginning of the fourth canto, where this is all described very beautifully. These are all transcendental activities of Lord Shiva. So we should not somehow think that Lord Shiva is in the mode of ignorance. Because in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Shiva is called Bhagavan Shiva. The word Bhagavan is used to address the Supreme Lord and also used to address great personalities who are almost at the level of the Lord in terms of their purification and so on. So Lord Shiva is all auspicious. The word Shiva means auspicious. So Lord Shiva is so auspicious and so renounced. So we should not make the offense of considering Lord Shiva somehow degraded. So that is a big offense as a devotee of the Lord. And Srimad Bhagavatam says that Vaishnavana Mitha Shambhu. So he's the foremost among Vaishnavas. So as Vaishnavas, we say we should not offend any Vaishnavas. So there is no question of offending the greatest of all Vaishnavas. So Lord Shiva, he creates this progeny who become so destructive that some of them start chasing even Brahma. So Brahma realizes this is not the time for this type of progeny to come. There's going to be a time later on during the devastation of the world when that progeny should be produced, and not right now. So he tells Lord Shiva that, Shiva, don't create any more progeny. This is not the time for that. So if you read the translation of the prior text, he tells him, my dear son, you had better situate yourself in penance, which is all auspicious for living entities and which will bring benediction upon you. So he says, don't continue this creation of your living entities. You go and perform penance. And the text 19 that we read, where Brahma says to Rudra, by penance only can one even approach the personality of Godhead, who is within the heart of every living entity, and at the same time beyond the reach of all senses. So I wanted to maybe focus on a couple of points on this purport and the verse, where Brahma says, tapasa, by penance only can one even approach the personality of Godhead. So this word tapasa or penance is very important for devotees, for practicing devotees. or sadhakas. So we are all sadhakas. Of course, some of you may be siddhas, but by and large, we are all sadhakas, practitioners of devotional service. And the concept of tapasya is very important for us. So if you in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna speaks about this. He says, yajna, tapa, and dana, which means sacrifice, austerity, and charity. These three should never be given up, even at a practicing stage or a perfect stage. Because we always talk about detachment. I'm going to be very detached, very renounced. But doesn't mean that we renounce performance of austerity. Doesn't mean we renounce giving charity. So a grahastha, many of us are grahasthas. Grahastha's responsibility is to maintain the renounced order, to give charity. So as a grahastha, if you say, I'm so renounced that I've renounced giving of charity, that is not appropriate. That is not the right renunciation. So renunciation doesn't mean we give up giving of charity. So if somebody asks for a donation, you cannot say, Prabhu, I've so renounced that I've renounced giving up charity. That is not something you can renounce. That is a requirement. Similarly, you cannot renounce tapasya. You cannot say that I've renounced following Ekadashi now. That is a required tapasya. Or you cannot say I've renounced performing of yajna. And Prabhupada speaks about this so many times in his various purports that the only yajna that works in the age of Kali is the chanting of the holy name. Sankirtan yajna. Right? So in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Sukadeva Goswami says that Kale dosha nidhe rajan astin eko mahan gunaha kirtanadeva krishnasya mukta sangha param brajit. So this Kali Yuga, Kalo dosha nidhe rajan, O king, this Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. But there is one great benediction in Kali Yuga. Kirtanad eva krishnasya, simply by chanting Krishna's name, you can get the highest achievement. So this Kali Yuga, this performance of Sankirtan is the only yajna that works. So now we clearly know what yajna to perform. Because of the grace of Srila Prabhupada, he's very clearly, systematically told us, chant 16 rounds. And that's the yajna we can perform. Someone may ask, why 16 rounds? Why is Prabhupada talking about 16 rounds? Nowhere in the Gita does Krishna tell Arjuna chant 16 rounds. Right? Nowhere in the Gita is any verse where Krishna is asking Arjuna, have you finished your rounds? Right? Or nowhere Arjuna is telling Krishna that, Krishna, can you take this chariot behind the tree? I still have 4 rounds remaining. There's no such discussion. Right? So we wonder why 16 rounds. But Krishna says in the Gita, Satatam kirtayanto mam, always chanting my glory. So the expectation is that as devotees, we will be constantly chanting Krishna's name. So Srila Prabhupada gave us concession saying, yes, because of our condition, we will not be able to chant 192 rounds. At least let's chant 16 rounds as a regulation. And Prabhupada gives us that concession. So that's why it's important to understand why we're chanting these rounds. So yajna, we talked about. And dana, of course, dana is according to our capacity. Whatever capacity we have, right? Not everybody has a lot of Lakshmi. So whatever capacity we have, we can give some donation, some dana. It's our responsibility. So because Krishna doesn't see how much we give, Krishna is seeing how much we're holding back. In the Ramayana, there is a pastime, all of you know this pastime, where when Hanuman was helping the building of the bridge, a little squirrel was also helping. And the squirrel was trying to collect little pebbles. And Hanuman saw the squirrel running between his legs and trying to go and almost tripping Hanuman. Hanuman's like, why are you in the way? Whatever you're doing doesn't really have any impact anyway. I'm carrying these huge boulders, you're just in the way. And Lord Ramachandra told Hanuman that for me, there is no difference between the service that you're doing and the service the squirrel is doing. Because you're carrying as much as your capacity allows, and the squirrel is doing the same thing. So whatever his capacity is, the squirrel is carrying as much as his capacity allows. And Hanuman, you are so powerful, you're carrying as much as your capacity allows. So as far as I'm concerned, there is no difference between the service of the squirrel and the service of Hanuman. That's how the Lord looks at it. So we heard this many times from many different acharyas, that bhavagrahi janardana, bhavagrahi. So bhava means the mood or the intention. Grahi means accepts. So the Lord accepts our mood and intention. Right? So if you remember from the 10th canto of Bhagavatam and Krishna book also, when Krishna is born, Vasudeva gives mentally, he donates thousands of cows to different people because he's in a prison house. His hands are shackled. He has no ability to actually do anything. He cannot actually give donation, but he mentally gives donation of hundreds and thousands of cows. Of course, we should not use that as an excuse to only mentally give donation. If we have the ability, we should also actually give the best of our ability, and not just money. Donation just doesn't mean time. It doesn't mean money alone. Dana does not just mean money. It also means time, means effort. So all of us we may not have money, but we have time. We have bodily strength. So we can perform seva. And that is also a donation of time. So let's not think that if we don't have a lot of money, we cannot give dana. As long as we have our bodies, we can still perform seva, service, and donate in that way. So I've talked about yajna and I've talked about dana. Now the one that's in the middle is tapa, which is what this verse talks about. So Brahma is saying that even only by tapa can you approach the Lord. There's no other way. And so what is this tapa? Now there are many kinds of tapa. If you read the 17th chapter of the Gita, Krishna speaks about this also, that there's tapa in the mode of ignorance, tapa in the mode of passion, and tapa in the mode of goodness. Now Hiranyakashipu, he also performed tapasya. Now he stood on one toe actually, and with his hands upraised for thousands of celestial years. Now if you try to stand on one leg, forget about standing on your toe, just stand on your foot with one foot and put your hands raised up like this. And if you stand for even like maybe half an hour, your arms will start aching. So from a physical standpoint, the tapasya performed by Hiranyakashipu was not some ordinary tapasya. It's extraordinary tapasya that no human can actually perform. But what was the intention of that tapasya? Intention was to become so powerful that he can kill the Lord himself. So it is not the tapasya which is important, it is the objective of the tapasya. I've heard from acharyas and authorities that if you perform Nirjal Ekadashi, every Ekadashi, and you start looking at other people who are maybe not performing Nirjal Ekadashi and look at them and say, this person is fallen because they are drinking or eating and not following Nirjal Ekadashi, then it may be better for you to actually eat something than feel that you're better than somebody else. So the objective of performing Ekadashi or any of these austerities is actually to bring ourselves closer to Krishna. That is the objective of the austerity. So when we willingly sacrifice something that we want and utilize that effort and energy and time in the service of the Lord, that is the austerity that pleases the Lord. Because so many people perform so many austerities. For instance, if you have to compete in a sporting event, the athletes perform so much austerity. You cannot compete at a sporting event if you don't perform austerity. They have to get up very early in the morning. They have to run for miles, lift ungodly amounts of weight, and they have to not eat so many different foods, right? If you want to become a gymnast, and if you eat ice cream every day, you're not going to become a gymnast. So you have to not eat ice cream or all these things. So even common people, they perform austerity for so many things. If you want to win political office, you perform so much austerity, you smile at everybody, even though you may not feel like smiling, right? You pick up babies that you don't feel like picking up. That's also an austerity, right? So if you want to become a businessman, you have to travel to so many places and do business with so many people with great inconvenience, make money. So it's all austerity. But the objective is not Krishna. So the austerity which is talked about in this verse is austerity which is specifically geared towards increasing our connection with Krishna. That is the only austerity which makes a difference. Otherwise, people perform austerity all the time. So when we say we have to perform austerity, people think that we're talking about doing something that people don't normally do. Austerity is not that. So we do austerity all the time. If you look around you, people who are materialistic, they perform more austerity than devotees because they struggle so hard to make money. And they're not sleeping at night and they're doing so much hard work and travel and so much stress they have to take on. People who run large companies, they have to take so much stress on. So there's so much austerity that goes into doing any endeavor. So as humans, we are used to performing austerity. But as devotees, what we have to get trained is how do we turn the objective of these austerities to Krishna? So it's not so much the activity which is different, it is the purpose of the activity which is different. And that becomes Krishna conscious. So when we become focused on performing our austerities for pleasing Krishna or pleasing our spiritual master, then that austerity becomes meaningful. And so what Brahma is advising Rudra here is that perform austerity, perform penance. And that penance is necessary for attaining the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as Srila Prabhupada says. So those are some of my thoughts on this verse and the focus of austerity and the importance of austerity. Prabhupada, and I'll just end with this and maybe we can discuss any questions. Srila Prabhupada also made it very easy for us. Like for instance, for a performance of Ekadashi, Prabhupada said, well, no grains and beans. The actual standard for Ekadashi is absolutely no eating or drinking of any sort. Prabhupada made it easy for us. Okay, no grains and beans. So you can, and then devotees are so creative that they've made so many different varieties. So people eat more opulently on Ekadashi than in normal days. But so Prabhupada is so gracious and he's so kind on us that he's made it very easy for us. The chant 16 rounds, right? And follow the regulative principles. Prabhupada calls it regulative principles of freedom because they actually free us from the bondage of all these different connections that materialistic people have to maintain. And so Prabhupada makes it so easy for us with chanting the holy name, practicing the process of reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And increasingly, people are getting away from studying Prabhupada's books. But when you start studying Prabhupada's books, there's nothing else that needs to be studied. Because Prabhupada has put everything that we need for practicing Krishna consciousness in his books. I was hearing Shrutakirti Maharaj the other day on Prabhupada Vyasa Puja Day, and he was narrating a story that he's narrated many times. And he said, one time when he was servant of Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada called him to his room, rang his bell, and Shrutakirti Maharaj went there, and Srila Prabhupada was reading the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And he looked at him and said, all you need to do is read this one book and you can go back to Godhead. And then he continued reading. And then Shrutakirti Prabhu just left the room. That was the end of the conversation. And he said, after 6 months, another time he rang his bell, Shrutakirti Maharaj went in and he was reading Nectar of Devotion at that time. That book had come out, reading Nectar of Devotion. And Srila Prabhupada said, all you need to do is read one chapter of this book. You don't have to read any other book. This one chapter, not even the whole book. And you can become completely Krishna conscious. And then it happened another 6 months later, the Krishna book had come out and Prabhupada was reading Krishna book. He would read his own books. And Shuddhakirti Prabhu was saying that Srila Prabhupada never asked us to do anything that he didn't do himself. He would chant 16 rounds. He would follow, of course, principles, of course, but he would read books too. He would read his own books. He would say that these are not my books, these are words of Krishna. So he didn't say, go read my books, and he never read them. He used to read his own books. The third time he was reading Krishna book, and Srila Prabhupada told Sudhakirti Maharaj that all you need to do is read one page of this book. Not even one page, one line of this book, and you become fully Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada was so keen. And devotees think, and when I've heard from senior Srila Prabhupada disciples and people who associate with Srila Prabhupada, many of them are unanimous in this one point. When they say, what was Srila Prabhupada's greatest contribution? Yeah, he built so many temples, initiated so many disciples, but they're unanimous in telling us that the greatest contribution of Srila Prabhupada was his books. So the least we can do is study Srila Prabhupada's books. And that is the tapasya that I'm hoping that with our discussion, you can take away that let's make it our tapasya to read Srila Prabhupada's books, study Srila Prabhupada's books every day. And that tapasya will be very joyful. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Anand Vilas Prabhu, for this wonderful Shri Krishna Katha from the Nectarian Srimad Bhagavatam. Wow. It says, if wishes were horses, fools would be riding them. And me being a fool, I wish that we didn't have anything to do than just to hear Krishna Katha 24/7. How wonderful that would be. But dear devotees, if anyone has questions, comments, reflections, realizations, you may want to ask or share, please indicate by using the hand emoji or your physical hand, and you will be asked to unmute to ask your questions or share your reflections. Hare Krishna. Well, Prabhuji, I have this question. In the first place, thank you so much for speaking. You were just sharing a pastime that Shruta Kirti Prabhu was saying that Srila Prabhupada never asked us to do anything that he himself didn't do. Now, you were sharing about the pastimes of Uddhava, Vidura, and Maitreya. Uddhava was junior in terms of age to Vidura, so he didn't feel that it was appropriate for him to educate Vidura. So he referred him to Maitreya. Now, when Srila Prabhupada came to the West, he was already an elderly person when he came to the West, so he could speak to people. Now, lots of his students, lots of his disciples were very young people. And they were going out to preach. And they were going out to preach to all sorts of people. So my question is, what do we as devotees who are supposed to be preachers take from Uddhava refusing to impart the knowledge to Vidura and referring him to Maitreya Rishi, who was an age appropriate for him to speak to him? I'm here, I may be younger in age than somebody I'm trying to preach to, but as a matter of duty and responsibility, I'm supposed to preach to this particular individual. What do we do? This is my question. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you. Nice question. And I'll answer directly from Srimad Bhagavatam and what Prabhupada said. So, Prabhupada says in the purports of Srimad Bhagavatam that when he speaks about Prithu Maharaj was very respectful to the elderly. He served the elderly. And this is in the 4th canto. This is in the 16th chapter, in the middle of the 16th chapter. This comes where the personalities are glorifying Prithu Maharaj, and they say that he served the elderly. And Prabhupada defines elderly in this. He says one can be advanced age in two ways. One is simply physical years, the other is knowledge. So a person who has advanced knowledge is also considered of advanced age from a knowledge perspective. So that's one way to understand. And so when we are asked to preach by our spiritual master on the orders of Srila Prabhupada, that is our responsibility to share Krishna Katha. Prabhupada says in the purports that if you don't know much, you can still just ask people to chant Hare Krishna. And that is also preaching. So that is what Srila Prabhupada says. Now, when it comes to a one-to-one scenario where you're trying to instruct somebody, then you have to use your judgment. That does that person feel they can hear something from you, or they may not? Like, for instance, this very common crisis that I'm sure many of us face in our life, that very difficult to preach to your parents because they've changed your diapers, right? They've kind of, very difficult to preach to your parents because for your father or your mother, right, you're always a child. You could be 70 years old, but if your parents are still alive at that point, they still consider you a child. So it's not easy to preach to your parents. So in that case, I've seen many devotees where they connect their parents to other devotees that they can preach to them, right? So we have to use our intelligence and judgment, like Srila Prabhupada always talked about. So the idea is, if you are trying to preach to somebody who may be more advanced in age than you, or maybe more in a senior position, but you're doing it because of your false ego, then that's a problem. But if you're doing it from the perspective of just sharing Krishna Katha, and then let Krishna inspire them from their heart, you can always share Krishna Katha. Right? So you can always tell some senior devotee, if you're speaking to them, I was just reading this, and Srila Prabhupada said this. He's just sharing. That is always wonderful. If they're interested in hearing, you can share. But if you're instructing them saying, Prabhu, you should do this, and this is what you're doing, this is not right, then you're taking the position of authority and trying to instruct them, which may not be appropriate. Or even if it's appropriate, they may not listen to you. Or they may not feel that you are the right person to tell them. So we should always keep the objective in mind. What is the objective? To make them Krishna conscious. And what is the best way to make them Krishna conscious? Whether that comes from you or comes to somebody else, as long as they become Krishna conscious, that should be the objective. If your objective is that no, Krishna consciousness to this person has to come through me and have to be the person that gives them Krishna consciousness, then the objective is wrong. Then your objective is to try to glorify yourself as opposed to give them Krishna consciousness. So a little bit of maturity is needed, a little bit of clarity of thought is needed, and then you can use your judgment to say, okay, right, in this scenario, maybe I should just ask somebody else. Like you may have a senior godbrother or some other devotee and say, you know what, Roji, this person is very nice. And I've seen this happen even with my own spiritual master, this one was Radhanath Swami, where one time there were some guests who would come to the temple, and they were from the atomic laboratory. They were nuclear scientists. So they attended the program, and so they wanted to ask some questions. And Maharaj referred them to one of his other disciples who's also a nuclear scientist or some other professor in the university. He said, talk to them. And then they went and spent an hour with them, and they were very satisfied. Because Maharaj decided that, well, I don't have any academic standing, and these are all academicians, they're from university. So if they meet another university professor who's also a devotee, they're in a much better position to speak the same language, the same wavelength. So in the case, there was no question of who's the spiritual authority, but my spiritual master used his judgment to say, in this scenario, it's better they hear from somebody who's from their same fraternity of university professors, so that they have the credibility that, well, this person's also a PhD in science. And so he's saying this from a scientific perspective, as opposed to just a Swami who has no other perspective. So that's why we have to use our judgment at all times. Hopefully that answers the question, Puri.
Very much, yes. Very, very much. It answers my question very much. It's so beautiful. It's interesting how the Wetty Association is so wonderful, because sometimes you will be struggling with some question in your mind, and then you ask the question to a devotee, and then he gives you a very simple solution to what has been bothering your mind for so long. Yeah. Because, I mean, like you said, we've been studying the Bhagavatam in a chronological order. So we read where Vidura did this, didn't speak to, sorry, Uddhava didn't speak to Vidura. And I've been thinking about it since that time. So thank you so much for the explanation. Thakur Murari Prabhu, please, you may unmute. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. It's an Nagami anytime. So actually, very, 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 to know what you were. Nice to see you present on the forum.
Thakur Murari, your audio is not very clear.
I mean, I mean, my phone. How is it like? Is that better?
Yeah, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the presentation. And as you say, the study of Srimad Bhagavatam, we have said what to do. So powerful. So, next year, and the question that I have, the answer, to the answer and the phone. Thank you. From not coming to it, that means phone. Terrible.
Well, Hare Krishna. It was not very clear, but what I got was Thakur Murari was expressing his appreciation. Of course, he's also a Gita Nagari Bhakta. And of course, he knows Anand Vilas Prabhu. So he's expressing his appreciation, hearing from you and seeing you on this platform.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Anyone else with something to ask or to share? Hari Chakra Prabhu, yes. You may unmute, Hari Chakra Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Anand Vilas Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Dandava Pranam, and all glories to the assembled devotees. Yeah, actually, in the questions that Prabhu asked, I had wanted to make a follow-up question, but during the course of your answering the question, I think you answered my question, because I was going to ask that why would Sukadev Goswami, who was not very advanced in age, be the one who was selected to talk, whilst some great personalities like Vyasadeva himself and all these great personalities were there. But in the course of you answering this question, I think my question was answered. Now, my other question is how Prabhupada kept saying that he has everything in his books for us to take us back home, back to God. And now, a lot of devotees we know recently, a lot of devotees also enjoy reading other books from different places, especially different acharyas on our line. And if you question some of them, what they say is that when during Prabhupada's purpose and everything, Prabhupada normally make reference to some of these acharyas. So once Prabhupada makes reference to these acharyas, then it means it's good that we go and check those books also. So my question is, so does that the mere fact that Prabhupada made a reference to a particular book, does it necessarily mean that we go and check out that book? Or the very information that Prabhupada has just given us is enough for us to absorb ourselves in it and be able to achieve our ultimate goal?
Wonderful question, Shari Chakra Prabhu, as always. And Prabhupada has actually given a clear answer to this question as well, where And I'll start with an anecdote and then I'll answer the question directly. So one time when Srila Prabhupada was there's one devotee who was reading Hari Bhakti Vilas by Sanatana Goswami. Hari Bhakti Vilas is a small book, it's a booklet by Sanatana Goswami Pad. Of course, Prabhupada had not translated that book. He got that copy from somewhere. So Srila Prabhupada saw him reading that book. And so Hari Bhakti Vilas, if you know what it is, it's a lot of rules and regulations of how devotees should act and what they should do and not do and so on. So Srila Prabhupada told that devotee, don't read this book. And he left. Then after a few days, again, when he saw this devotee, he was still reading the book. And he told him, I told you not to read the book. Why are you reading this book? The devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, this is Sanatana Goswami's book. Why should we not read it? It's in our parampara. And Srila Prabhupada said that, yes, it is Sanatana Goswami's book. And it's got all these rules and regulations that are for devotees. But if you're not in the proper consciousness, you read this book, then you will start thinking how wonderful you are that you're following these rules and regulations and how fallen others are that are not following these rules and regulations. And that will create havoc in your spiritual life. So the gist of what Prabhupada is saying is that Prabhupada is actually, if you read his purports, his Bhagavad Gita, in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, my obeisances to Baladev Vidyabhushan. So all his purports are based on the purports of Baladev Vidyabhushan, which is then based on the purports of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and others. So he brings all of that into his purports. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam is based on the purports of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Jiva Goswami, and Sridhar Swami, the original commentator on the Bhagavatam and so on. So he brings all of that. So the question is not whether the other books are good or not. The question is, do we have the maturity to understand what is written in those other books? That is the question. The real question is, are we capable that we don't misunderstand what's written in the other books? So the issue is our capability, not the appropriateness of the other books. The books written by, for instance, Jiva Goswami's Shat Sandarbhas are very wonderful. But do we have the ability to understand the 6 Sandarbhas? And do we have the ability to ensure we are not misunderstanding these other Sandarbhas? So Srila Prabhupada gives us these purports in very clear, plain language that we can understand and implement in our life. So that's one answer. The second answer is that if someone wants to read other books, I would say, have you finished reading Srila Prabhupada's books? Have you finished studying Prabhupada's books? So if we have studied the Bhagavad Gita as it is, the Srimad Bhagavatam, all 12 cantos, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, all Madhya Lila, Adi Lila, Madhya Lila, and Antya Lila, Nectar of Devotion, right? Nectar of Instruction. The major books I'm saying. If you've read these books, Ishopanishad, if you've read these books, and then you want to understand deeper, then Bhaktivedanta Book Trust is coming up with other books, which are Acharyas, which are the Goswami's books. Like we have the Bhagat Bhagavatamrita by Srila Sanatana Goswami. Gopi Panadana Parup has translated them, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. That can be read. You can read Laghu Bhagavatamrita by Rupa Goswami. You can start reading Shat Sandarbhas. They're all okay to read. But we should first read Srila Prabhupada's books. It's not like a PhD level class is wrong. But if you're still in 10th grade, you cannot go and sit in a PhD level class. The best that might happen is you might get confused or you might misunderstand some instruction. So systematically studying Srila Prabhupada's book. So it is not that it's wrong to read the books of other acharyas in our line. What is the right approach is that we should first read Srila Prabhupada's books, study Srila Prabhupada's books, and once we've come to a point where we've read what Srila Prabhupada has given us, then we can read the Goswami literatures and so on. But Srila Prabhupada was very clear about one thing, that he didn't want us to read books that are from other sampradayas or upper sampradayas. So many people write so many books. The problem is that will only confuse us because some cases they're either blaspheming the philosophy of bhakti or some cases they're misinterpreting the philosophy of bhakti. So upper sampradaya books, of course, we should avoid. But even books of the acharyas, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and others, we should read them once we have finished reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And I can say with great deal of confidence that it'll take at least 30 years or 40 years of systematic study to say I've studied Srila Prabhupada's books completely. That Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, I personally have been studying these books for over 20 years. And I can say with full confidence that I'm only scratching the surface. I cannot claim to have fully studied these books. So there's so much in there that without actually taking the time and energy to actually study these books systematically, if you simply read other books because let me just go and try to find out what's in those other books, the point that I'm making is that it's not necessary. And in some cases, it might also confuse you. So let's just at least study Srila Prabhupada's books first. And then if somebody wants to hear a little more about, okay, this is what Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport, and he's referring this book, maybe I can just go and I want to get more detail, that's fine. But we have to, the basis is Srila Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada used to always say, books are the basis. Hari Chakra Prabhu, does that answer your question?
Sure, Prabhu, sure. Yeah, it really answers the question, because what I realize is that even there are some things Prabhupada himself has even said up in his books that I've read before. It's not that I've not read. I've read it before. But when I read Srila Bhattacharya Maharaj's book, that is explaining what Prabhupada said, I get so bewildered, because I then I say, oh, so this is what Srila Prabhupada was saying. But when I read it from Prabhupada, I didn't understand it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But when I read it from the explanation my Guru Maharaj gave, then it made so much sense to me. And so many a time, I will listen to lectures from different gurus, like Hridayananda Maharaj, KRSNA Goswami, and they will be treating a particular verse, the same verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. But the depth with which they explain the thing, when I read that verse myself, I don't get any idea towards the explanation they give. Which means even that simple sentence that Prabhupada has given in his own book, I read it and I miss the point until someone who is actually elevated gives me the actual purport. Then it opens my mind to understand exactly what Prabhupada is trying to say. So if even this one, I'm not understanding even Prabhupada, what to think of going to read Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami's book?
Exactly.
Till today, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's book, what is the name of that book? This book that Prabhupada translated, but it's Bhaktisiddhanta.
I mean, Brahma Samhita.
Brahma Samhita, yeah.
That book, no, not Brahma Samhita. Not Brahma Samhita. There is another book that the language, the English, just the English that Bhaktisiddhanta used in that book. I read, anytime I try to read, I just put it aside. Because that English is used in the, I think Prabhupada didn't change the English that, what do we call it? Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada used.
Yeah.
The English is so difficult. I read it and I just put the book aside. I said, no, I'm not here yet. Give me another time. So yeah, thank you very much. I perfectly understand the way you have given. It makes sense a lot.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. So we have Shriman Varahacharya Prabhu stand up. Prabhuji, please, you may unmute. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. This is Ramambo obeisance. All glories to the Prabhupada. Thank you very much, Prabhu. All glories to the Temple devotees. I have a feeling that whenever we hear from Radhana Maharaj disciples or from Radhana Maharaj himself, we just feel like it's just confirmation or in the same mood like what we used to hear from our Guru Maharaj.
Thank you.
But it's not the case most of the time with others. So I want to give an example here. This is a question that has been debated here many times, but in the light of the discussion going on, I want to make a reference, and then probably you can throw some light. Probably you have another angle to it. So this question has come up here several times about some devotees coming to preach what they read from other books, which is different from what Prabhupada had written. An example is the fact that Yasoda is said to be the mother of Krishna because she gave birth to twins. But that was not in Prabhupada books. Of course, so many discussions here. I tried to throw light on it. But just this morning, we were reading from Krishna book. And then I got some other point which really made me feel, why should anyone say anything different from what Prabhupada said? In the story, Gagamuni came to do the naming ceremony. And Gagamuni was telling Nanda Maharaj, actually, you're not the father of Krishna. And he was the first person to reveal that to him. That Krishna is actually the son of Vasudeva. That according to astrological calculation, there's no way Yashoda could have given, Devaki could have given back to a girl. So in reality, Vasudeva is actually the father of Krishna. But those who come present to us what they found out, or in whether tradition, whether in other Acharya's books, they're saying that the real Krishna actually took back in the tavern. And Krishna Vasudeva only merged in the Vasudeva, in the original Krishna, Swayam Bhava Krishna. But then Gagamuni would be making a mistake then, not to know that he was considered to be a very highly netted astrologer, etc., etc. And he could not see. And he did not know that Swayam Bhagavan Krishna had appeared as the son of Yasoda. And only Vasudeva Krishna went and got merged into him. Why did Gagamuni did not have that information? If those other versions are true. And of course, Prabhupada did not present other versions. He gave us the version that is easy to understand. So just, I'm saying this, maybe you have something else to say on the contrary, but I'm only saying that whatever Prabhupada has given us is always the best for us. And Krishna knew why he chose Prabhupada to come to the West, not other acharyas. All these other acharyas were there, but Krishna chose Prabhupada. Just the same way Krishna chose Arjuna to receive Bhagavad Gita, even though there were so many brahmanas and acharyas. So this is just my comment, Prabhu, but I want you to throw some light on the fact that Gagamuni did not say anything to the effect that Yasoda had given back to twins or to Swayam Bhagavan Krishna, different Vasudeva Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you, Sriman Prabhu. So I will narrate a pastime when Srila Prabhupada was in Kumbh Mela. This was in the early 70s, I think. The Tamal Krishna Goswami was there and Yamuna Mataji. They were having a discussion on what is the difference between Krishna and Balaram. So one of them said that the only difference between Krishna and Balaram, they're both the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The only difference is that Krishna is dark complexion, black, and Balaram is white complexion. That is the only difference. And the other person, I forget who said what, but the other person said, no, the only difference between them is that only Krishna enjoys with Radharani. That is the only difference between Krishna and Balaram. So they were debating this and says, let's go and ask Srila Prabhupada. They went and asked Srila Prabhupada, and So, Mr. Srila Prabhupada, we have a question that Tamal Krishna Goswami, so Yamuna is saying that the only difference between Krishna and Balaram is that Krishna is black and Balaram is white. Srila Prabhupada said, you're right. Then she said, but no, Srila Prabhupada, but the only difference that I've read about Krishna and Balaram is that only Krishna enjoys with Radharani. Prabhupada said, you're right. So the third person said, but Srila Prabhupada, Yamuna Mataji is saying this is the only difference between Krishna and Balaram, and Tamal Krishna Goswami is saying this is the only difference. How can both be right? Srila Prabhupada turned to him and said, you're right. So they're like, how can all three be right? What is the right answer? Srila Prabhupada said, you decide. And he walked away. So the purport of this pastime that I understood is that the Lord's pastimes are unlimited, whereas we are not unlimited. So sometimes the acharyas will reveal as much as we can digest and how much is necessary. So Krishna's pastimes are unlimited. We can never actually understand Krishna's pastimes, right? So our understanding, and this is a very important point that I learned, that our understanding of Krishna will always be incomplete because Krishna is unlimited. Our understanding of Krishna's pastimes will always be incomplete. But while it may be incomplete, it should not be incorrect. And what is correct is that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All these other details are nice, but no matter how much we dig, our understanding of Krishna's intricacies of why he did certain things and why where Acharya said what and when and why, we will never be able to unravel. And sometimes that just becomes bylanes in our path to make progress in Krishna consciousness. So we should focus on how can we become more Krishna conscious? How can we become more attached to Krishna? Because the reality is, even if somebody were to clearly answer one question, then there'll be a second question about some other pastime that will come which you don't understand. So I will end this discussion with one instruction that I was given by my senior god brother Govinda Prabhu, some of you may know. And he was telling me that in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the first verse, there are two words that are used, abhigya and swarat. Abhigya means fully cognizant, and swarat means fully independent. The Lord is fully cognizant and fully independent, which means that he doesn't need any reason for doing anything, nor does he need anybody's permission. Right? So when he said that when you read the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam and you have questions about why Krishna did this or why that happened, then the answer to those questions is go back and read first canto. Because the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the pastimes of Krishna, are simply for relishing, not for intellectually understanding, because you will not be able to intellectually understand it. So that's how I've internalized some of these, things and details. Of course, different rasas, right? Rasas are just like humans have so many different relationships. A same person may have so many different relationships with so many different individuals. I mean, you may be a father, a husband, a son, an employee, a friend, all at the same time. You're one person. You're not 18 different people. So if a human being like us can have all these different rasas, then what to speak of the Supreme Lord when he has unlimited rasas, unlimited pastimes, unlimited connections. So I didn't directly answer your question because the reason is that it is not possible to directly answer these questions in terms of specific pastimes of the Lord. So we should just enjoy the sweetness of these pastimes as opposed to try to intellectually analyze, is what my understanding is. Because no matter what answer I or anybody else gives you, we will never be fully satisfied because our intellectual curiosity will never be satisfied because we try to understand the pastimes of the Lord who's unlimited, which is never possible. I'm sorry I didn't specifically answer your question, but that is the best answer I have received over the years in terms of how we can understand the nuances of the Lord's pastimes.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. From your answer, I can understand the polemics better, because some other devotees have also answered in this same manner. So I could understand, the intricacies about that question. But then the only thing I'm going to say, that why do we fuse about, I'm saying, I repeat the word, why do we make fuse about book changes? Book changes have become such an issue in ISKCON that they have set up many committees to look into it. So if actually whatever Krishna did or whatever Prabhupada said can be seen in another light, why we make fuss about about book changes? And when questions came up about book changes, those who are against the book changes did say, they quote Prabhupada saying, if you just change one word, you change everything. So I'm just wondering why the society have become so much, I don't say it's disturbed, but there's been so much argument about why there have been so many changes to the books, Prabhupada books. So if Krishna's pastime and the scriptural understanding is unlimited, then I think the book can continue changing forever without we stopping about making any fuss about them. We can just keep on changing, and we use this argument that Krishna is unlimited, so we can just keep changing them. That's it. So anyway, I don't want to make up an argument, but I understand your answer. Thank you.
Prabhupada talked about this as well, right? In his purports in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, also he speaks about it, that it is the responsibility of the acharyas and the next generation to explain Shastra in a way that is understandable to the common masses. I'm not talking about the book changes. That is not a topic that I want to touch because that's outside my purview. I'm not in any way in any BBT or anything. I'm just a devotee here, trying to be a devotee. So I'll answer the question from the perspective that when we sometimes preach, we give example of body and soul. We may give example of car and driver, but Vyasadeva never gave example of car and driver. So doesn't mean that it's a wrong example. So we have to use the example that makes sense for when we even speak, right? We said we should not change Shastra. Yes, but then we have to explain Shastra in a way that's understandable to people that we're speaking to, right? So if you're speaking to an audience that doesn't understand something very specific to, say, an Indian cultural reference, then you have to speak in a way that the audience understands what is being spoken. If you're given a university lecture, you have to speak in a way that, if you go to a university class, if you ask to speak in a university, sometimes I go to universities and I speak, I cannot go and say I'm such a fallen soul, and you cannot speak like that. It doesn't work because they're wondering, what are you talking about, right? So the way you give a lecture in a temple room is different from how you give a lecture in a classroom, in a university classroom. So the content is the same, the intent is the same, the subject matter and the philosophy is the same, the principles are the same, but the way it's presented can be presented in a way that the audience can understand. So the one thing that I'll end with this, that the principles cannot be compromised. But if you are presenting the principles in a way that the audience can understand what the principles are, then I think that's still in service of what Srila Prabhupada is talking about. But if you're modifying the principles, then that's a problem. So it's a very fine line, right? So you have to use your maturity and then, of course, the instructions of the acharyas. Prabhuji, I think we can stop here. Sorry, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much,
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
For being here. One quick thing I would like to say is this devotee, Anandvilas Prabhu, please just be silent for a minute. I do not want you to interrupt me, please. Anandvilas Prabhu is my beloved brother here in Gita Nagari. What I'm about to say, I'm not 100% sure, I'm just speculating. But I think he is very much blessed by Srimati Radharani, whose appearance day was yesterday. No one cooks better than Srimati Radharani. And Anand Vilas Prabhu has so many services that he performs in the Vaishnava service, but one of his most wonderful service is cooking for the pleasure of the devotees and their lordships. So you may come to Gideon Library and may not find him anywhere except you go to the kitchen. He is also a very humble disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. And a few weeks ago, His Holiness Kavichandra Swami Maharaj was speaking on this platform, and he made a reference of Saint Francis of Assisi, who said that one should preach all the time. One should preach all the time. And if there is any point in time that one has a little bit of free time, then one may speak. In other words, our lifestyle should be the preaching. And once we have a little bit of opportunity to say something, we say something. So Anand Vilas Prabhu, we all can attest that he speaks beautifully, but he speaks very, very, very seldomly. And I'm very grateful that we were able to get him to speak on this platform because he seldomly speaks. But if you meet him in person, his lifestyle is the preaching itself. So we are very grateful to have him here today, and hopefully, many more in the days to come. Prabhuji, we're very grateful to have your association here today. And with that, devotees, we're going to humbly request you all to kindly unmute yourselves, and we all with one voice, one love, one heart, chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to express our deepest appreciation to our revered speaker, His Grace Anand Vilas Prabhu, for sharing his love and wisdom with us all today. Jai. Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama,
Hare
Rama
Rama
Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
Panchakapa Tarubhascha, Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha, Param Pavanabhyo, Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha.
Hare
Ananta Murti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Jai.
All Grace Anand Vilas Prabhu ki jai. All everybody ki jai.
Jai.
All those assembled Vaishnava
Krishna
Vishnu.
Prabhupada.
Hare.
Hare.
Hare